Good morning and welcome to the January 14th, 2026 Finance Committee meeting. Thank you for waking up early and coming downtown. We have a couple. First motion would be to approve today's agenda. So moved. Second. All in favor? Agenda passes. We have two sets of minutes from previous October 8th and November 12th meeting. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes? Sonia Howard Hall moves. Ms. Campbell seconds. All in favor? Thank you. First up is an update from Alvarez and Marsal. That's from Ms. Gordon Roberts. Thank you.
Good morning, Finance Committee, Dr. Watts. The mic. Oh, sorry. There you go. Fun size. As we think about strategic priority number 4 of the district, efficient, effective, and equitable resource stewardship, we're going to spend some time today during the A&M portion of the update talking to you a little bit about the budget process, where we are, and where we have to go over the coming weeks. Again, stewardship, when we think about, being able to look at those performance objectives, conducted comprehensive and objective evaluations to promote that continuous improvement in district effectiveness. And what are those key performance indicators that show where we are on that, on achieving that priority, looking at reports on implementation and findings from our program evaluations, comprehensive needs assessment, and return on investments. So our objectives today is that we will provide an update on A&M's work, particularly as it's tied with the budget process, along with kind of the key milestones that you should expect over the course of the budget process, as well as what our immediate next steps are. We'll work in partnership with Ms. Taylor and Heather, who have been working on the ROI, to talk about how the budget process will be integrated with the ROI process, how ROI is driving some of that real-time mid-year strategic adjustments that the district is in the process of working on now. We'll talk through enrollment trends and projections, and then we'll spend some time overall on compensatory education and funds and on how the district's allocated. And this is a combination, both A&M and representatives from the district. So for the budget process, when we were with you all in the board retreat back in September, we kind of talked through recommendations that A&M had around the budget process. And so when we looked at where you all were on the budget process continuum, the practice of really just kind of rolling the budget from the current year to the succeeding year really just encouraged growth in department spend without having real justification for what those resources were used for, and making sure that they were tied back to the impact that they were intended to have. When we think about some of the short-term, and term-limited spend, there wasn't a way to kind of control for ending investments that were tied with that spend when that spend, the term of that spend was over. And then on the HR side, looking at weak position control, vacancy management, lots of vacancies that exist in the district, but it's not really reflected in how the budget was built. And then the RO capabilities were there. You all were starting that work. They were emerging, and I think what we'll talk about some today is how we're continuing to advance along the continuum. So our recommendations at that time, and the one I think that we've been focused most on at this point, is implementing that modified zero-based budgeting approach and continuing to sort of integrate ROI into the budget process and making the ROI process, like we said, more mature on the ROI continuum, and the work that, we're doing to integrate those two. Second, not necessarily secondary, but in conjunction with those things, we'll be looking at vacancy management, supplemental pay, and position control as it relates to how we think about salaries and those inputs into the budget process, enhancing governance and controls within the budget compliance, and then improving oversight of the enterprise fund. So really our focus, as we'll talk about today, is really the modified zero-based budgeting approach and the continued partnership between that and ROI. When we think about the refined budget process, what we really want to have is an integrated and strategic budgeting approach. And so the three key elements that we see to that is robust financial hygiene, so making sure that the data is correct, that it's accurate, what's going in, how we're tracking the data is appropriate for the inputs, for the outputs that we'll need on the other side of the process. A strategic budget process, so we're thinking about not just what we spent and what we want to spend, but why we want to spend it, what we're hoping to get from that, and how that aligns with the district's strategic priorities and mandates. And then systems alignment, making sure that the systems that we have as investments for the district are working on our behalf as part of this budget process, and they're not things that we're trying to force things into. So one of the things that we're working with the technology team on is making sure that the way we set up the budget request templates is allows for more automation in terms of upload, reducing any errors that may come with manual entry and things like that. So the systems are working more for you than sort of as an ancillary tool. So when we think about the way the outputs of that is really how do we make sure that our program investments are aligned with district strategy? And we'll spend some time talking about, particularly in the ROI section, about sort of what those programs are and how we think about what those investments should look like when they transition into the budget process. My favorite line on this slide is when investments align, outcomes are clear. We really want to make sure that when we're thinking about the investments that you all are making of resources for the district, that we know what we want to get from it, and when we're looking at it in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, next year, we can go back and say, we wanted to get this outcome, we got it, and this is why, or we didn't, these are the things we need to change, or maybe it's something that we need to abandon and move to something else. And so that's what we want to make sure that you all have the tools and the resources to do on a going forward basis. I want to ground us in some guiding principles we're thinking about, particularly not just for the budget process, but I think this will tie into ROI as well. We have 3 guiding principles that we're sort of grounding this exercise in. One is strategic value. Do the investments clearly align and advance district priorities? The second being evidence of impact. So that really gets into those key performance indicators and expected outcomes, and making sure that we have the evidence that the investments that we're making are producing meaningful results. And third is stewardship and trade-offs. Funds are finite, we can't do everything. So making sure that as stewards of the resources of this district, we're making the right trade-offs, we're making the right calls on how those investments are made, so that we're doing the things that advance outcomes for students. When we think about the evaluation framework, excuse me, and how we'll think about more of the how we do things, we have sort of 3 phases that we'll take things through. We'll ground things in the principles. So how does what we're doing, the work we're doing, align with the 3 grounding principles we just addressed? What's the process? So being very clear on what are what we're evaluating, what we're evaluating, and how that execution will work so that we can standardize it across departments and everyone's sort of talking about things, evaluating things, using similar processes and similar language. And then outcomes. What are the deliverables of that process? What are the outputs that we're expecting? And ultimately, what does SCCPSS gain from this effort? So talking about the budget process, there's a lot of words on this slide, but I think the 2 places that I'd like to sort of focus us on are the department kickoff meetings and the budget working sessions. So we started already kind of back in November, coming into January, doing a lot of the budget preparation, working with finance in particular. They're working on a lot of the enrollment projections and things of that nature. We've been working with technology to make sure, and finance to make sure that we're setting up the templates in a way that's effective for the resources that, for the process that you all have and the tools that you have that it integrates within those systems. When we think about the department kickoff meetings, those are the meetings that we had back in November. I'll go a little bit more detail, December. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that on the next slide. But that was a chance for us to meet with all the chiefs across the district to introduce them to the zero-based budgeting framework and talk a little bit about the thought exercises that they will be going through as a part of this budget process. The next step is the budget working sessions. These are coming up next week. And so we'll be working kind of hands-on with excuse me, with the chiefs to fill out their program inventories or to refresh their program inventories, as well as to coach them and sort of provide technical assistance on developing the budget request templates. During the second week in February, Dr. Watts will be meeting with the chiefs to kind of review their recommendations to her on their budget requests for that year, for FY27. That'll be her opportunity to kind of, I don't want to say grill them, but sort of give them feedback on what they're having, ask questions, sort of add her perspective on what her thoughts are in terms of what their requests are and where she thinks they need to go. In the end of March, we'll have the recommended budget, so we'll take the feedback from Dr. Watts, working alongside the chiefs and the departments to make sure that we have a budget that everyone's comfortable with, that meets the needs of the district, but is financially and fiscally responsible. During the March through May timeframe, between board meetings, public comment, other iterations of the budget, more formal numbers coming in on the revenue side, we'll do a number of different iterations of the budget as we continue to refine it for the ultimate adoption of the budget in June, in the millage rate in June. One of the things that we have been sort of coaching the team on is that this budget process will be iterative. Where we start is not going to be where we end, right? It won't be you'll sit down and do your budget in 10 minutes and the budget's done. This is going to be a time when we're wrestling with things, where we're making trade-offs, where we're saying, I'd like to have this, but I really need this, and that's a call that as a group and as a team we'll think through and make sure that ultimately the recommendation that we're putting forward, we feel good about the work that it's going to do for the students of the district. So going a little bit more detail into the budget kickoff meetings. Those meetings will happen coming up in January. Excuse me, these are the meetings from December, the working sessions, excuse me. So the zero-based budgeting framework we reviewed with the chiefs. One of the things that we're thinking about, and when we think about zero-based budgeting in this context, is discontinuing by default. And so historically, it was almost continue by default, right? You did it last year, you'll do it again next year. But now we'll think, what are you going to do next year? You did that last year. Why? What did you get from it? Why do we need to do it again? Is it the same level of investment that we had before? So it'll be a much more rigorous testing of those things that we would want to move forward with, and thinking about how we can, places where we need to strategically abandon investments that we made historically to be able to make investments in other high impact, high value initiatives and programs for the district. The strategic alignment and performance evaluation, this is really an opportunity to tie into the work that is being done on the program inventory. So thinking about, one, how does this program and this investment align with the strategic priorities of the district? And two, how did it do from an actual performance perspective? So if, we expected 5,000 people to access a certain platform, but only 100 people accessed it, then are we using it effectively? Do we still need it? Was there an issue with implementation? Just going through that exercise to see if it's, no one's gonna use this, it's not useful, and we abandon it, or we need to rethink our investment and how we implement it to get better outcomes and results. The third piece is then sort of getting into the nuts and bolts of the actual budget request. And so that's, now that we know what the programs are and where we want to make those investments, what's the buildup of funds that we'll need to do that effectively? And so department leaders were able to see kind of what they spent in FY24 and FY25, how their spending has been year to date for FY26, to start to think about, oh wait, we spent over in this category every year. Maybe we need to, if we're still gonna have that program based on meeting those other criteria, how do we need to address funding for this year? or for FY27 are actually, we actually haven't spent as much as we've asked for in prior years. Are we actually using this program? Is it something that we still need? Do we need to change our level of investment based on the actual performance of the program rather than just what we did last year? And so I think those meetings went well. We had, all the chiefs and their teams were very engaged and participatory in those things. And so we're looking forward to the budget working sessions that will happen next week. So a little bit about those sessions. They'll sort of have three key components. We'll start with the program inventory evaluation, working with Stacy Taylor and Heather Corbett, and you'll hear from them in a couple minutes on the ROI piece. But really thinking about that evaluation of the programs against the expected outcomes for last year, and really thinking about, are there programs that need to be strategically abandoned so that we can make investments in things that are of higher value and higher impact. Then we'll talk about the budget request development. And so thinking about, like we said before, what are the components that are required to execute a particular program, and starting to put pen to paper on what that request will be. And so as much as possible, we've asked people to bring the data that they need to support what that ask will be. So less of saying, oh, we spent, we've always asked for $20,000 for this, but rather, we're going to have 20 students that are going to use this, and we need X licenses for this, and it'll cost that. So having a very sort of, clear, data-driven build-up to what those requests are going to be for FY27. And the third piece is position, vacancy justification. And so when we think about the number of vacancies that the district has, it sometimes limits the ability to sort of strategically use those funds at the beginning of the year, because we're sort of building up the savings across the year. And so what we're thinking about now is, if there are positions that have been vacant for over a year, if we don't need them, let's sort of take the funding from sort of holding those positions and start the year by investing them in sort of programs and things like that, rather than sort of generating the vacancy savings and have to plan what we're going to do with it later. And so that's the point of kind of going through some of those those vacancies that have been sort of persistent for over a year. And so that concludes the A&M portion, kind of going through the budget process. Happy to ask any questions or hear any feedback that you all have on where we are in the process.
Ms. Hall, and then Dr. Hostens-Brown.
Well, this is very exciting, and I see you're going to be very thorough, and that's wonderful. I want to speak for a minute. You just spoke about vacancies, and if we don't need them, if we've had them so long, let's abandon them. My concern is that those vacancies represent things our children really do need, and for some reason, whether it's the job description, whether it's the salary attached, or what, that may be the problem, not that we don't need those positions just because we haven't been able to fill them. So I really like some effort spent to see, what are we denying our kids because we don't have those positions in place?
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think part of that exercise is the justification piece of that is the important piece, right? So if we're looking at a vacancy that's been old over a year, we sort of agree that it's a critical position. Then we need to start asking questions about some of the things that you raised, right? Like, if this is a critical position and we can't fill it, what's the bottleneck? And then starting to tease that out. And so I think it's less of if it's open a year, it gets swept, and more of, if it's open for that amount of time, let's start talking about why.
Yeah, why did we feel we needed it in the first place? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate this presentation and the level of detail. I think it's excellent for helping people understand how we're moving. There are two things that I'm very excited about. One is on slide 8, and that is the kind of the framework for how we're moving into zero-based budgeting. And if you're a budget unit head, you're not going to be troubled by moving from where we were to zero-based budget if you trust that you'll get what you need. If you're able to articulate what you need and justify it, you trust that you will get it. But obviously, in some of our practices in the past, that trust wasn't there, or there were obstacles to that. So as we're moving into talking to folks about, hey, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to do it in our goal, have you been getting any kind of qualitative feedback or taking notes on what some of the obstacles or challenges were that drove previous practices of kind of hoarding and sitting on dollars?
I mean, I think you've kind of named it there, right? The idea that if I need something, I can't get it, right? So I will either say, I'm gonna bucket and sort of hide it someplace, and then I can sort of transfer things if I need to. And I think what we hope to do from this process is to create transparency, not just for sort of the public and the board, but also for the chiefs and the departments to be able to say, these are all the things you need to operate to achieve your mandates, to achieve the strategic priorities of the district. And it's less about let's figure out how we can take money from you and more figure out how we can better fund the things that are most priority for you. And so I think, in the budget, in the department sort of kickoff working sessions, the workshops, we spent a lot of time less talking about let's figure out how we can cut your budget and let's figure out how we really build out all the components of what you need. There are things you're mandated to do that you have to do, right? We have to make sure that the funding is available for that. And so when we think about the language that we like to use and have been using with this group is not so much like let's go ahead and we're taking money away, but more we're thinking about how do we best invest the resources that we do have to achieve the outcomes. There may be places where we do find those sort of financial efficiencies where it's like, okay, there's an opportunity to reduce costs here. How do we deploy those resources better? But I think what we'd like to create for everyone is a sense of transparency so they know what they're paying for, they know what they should be getting for that money, and so they can actually feel even better about the work that their departments are doing because they're able to tie it more directly with outcomes in the investments that they're making.
Thank you. Okay. And then the other thing that I was excited about is the budget request development, like this process by which you articulate, this is what I need, this is why I need it. So in my NOAA job, we develop activity plans. That goes up to the directorate. It goes up to the directorate, gets reviewed, and you're proposing the activities for that year. You may or may not get it. So if there's 3 activities I normally do, I could send up 3. They could say, well, this is the one you get funding for this year. At the university, you send the department budget up, and the dean and the vice presidents and the provosts review it. So in what's the structure look like for us?
Yeah, I think there's a few places where that sort of review will happen, right? So the chiefs will submit their requests. I think the first line is really going to be Dr. Watts, and so those superintendent workshops that will take place in February will be her opportunity to, one, sort of kind of have discourse with them about these are some of the things that, I have questions about. I'm not sure about this program. We said we were going to do this with this program last year. It didn't happen. I'm not sure we need to make that investment, sort of that back and forth. And I think coming out of that, that's what, when we talk about that iteration, right? You may come in with 5 things that are invested one way, and you come out with 4 things that are invested a different way. Or it may be the same 5 things, but the investments look different. And so I think there is that opportunity, the first one being through Dr. Watts. I think given the sort of public nature of this process, another sort of point in that will be the public comment and the opportunity for the board to review. So while Dr. Watts is kind of that first line, I think you all will sort of see, unless you really want to see the details, but you'll kind of see what that roll-up is and what some of those programs are and what those, especially those sort of bigger ticket items are, and you're able to kind of weigh in on that. And so I think this process probably being a little bit more robust even than some of the ones you mentioned, I would say, there will be a number of pieces, a number of points in that where there will be the opportunity for someone to come and critique the budget. I mean, you guys have public comment period, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think all those points in time are going to be opportunities for feedback on the budget for us to kind of go back and say, okay, we need to kind of think about the programs that we have here, how the funding is allocated, and make any changes or refinements that need to be made to get to the ultimate outcome.
Thank you for that answer. I think that's good information, but I wasn't really clear in what I was trying to ask. I'm advocating for the employee. So let's say you have an employee or someone who's making a budget request that is a really, really good and valid request, but maybe it was completely articulated poorly. Or maybe it's a really good request and it's articulated well. Like, what's the process for the requester to present, this is what I need, and then get the feedback of, well, no, you don't really need that because we actually have you covered on this other side? Like, what's the process for the requester to get the feedback on what they're requesting and the likelihood of their request getting?
Yeah, I think that those first pieces, one during the working sessions and kind of the work that we'll do alongside them to get to the requests that go to Dr. Watt. So that'll be the first time when it's like, this justification, if you think this is a strong program, the justification's kind of weak. Dr. Watts doesn't have the ability to see X, Y, or Z, and so we need to kind of strengthen the justification around that. The key performance indicators, the metrics that you're pointing to don't necessarily align with what you thought your outcomes would be. So let's explain why and what we're going to do differently for next year to get what it is that we want. And so we'll sort of be the first line of kind of helping them to like think about how would they craft that to sort of be able to communicate what the realities are and sort of have the best justifications that, you know, are realistic, right? But like the best sort of wording, and a lot of things is how you're writing, what you actually put in there that makes sense. And then sort of Dr. Watts will be sort of the first recipient of all that information. And so I think the way her sessions are structured are kind of that back and forth. Like, I'm seeing this, it's not making sense to me. Help bring me along to where you are. Or, you know, I heard all that, but I'm still not aligned. And so I think there'll be a number of points where there's an opportunity to keep going back to the chiefs and the departments with the information that comes even from this, you know, the public process, to be able to say, okay, this is what we're hearing. Are there things we need to change in the justification, in the request, how we're presenting it, to make sure that we're getting to the intended purpose of the request?
Thank you.
If I can just add a couple of other things that have to be considered in that decision-making process is we have to get clear about projected revenue. So, you know, everybody can come and have the best justification and rationale for something, but resources are not infinite. So at some point, once we get clear on revenue, and I don't think in some cases, based on some recent conversations, we have estimated our revenue accurately, so we end up having more than we anticipate. But I have to first understand what our revenue is. And then when people come to me with things that they want, if it exceeds the amount that we get in revenue, then there has to be a choice and a trade-off at that point, right? And then the third criteria that I would be looking at in terms of revenue would be what is mandated. Because we do have things coming down from the state and other areas that we have to do, i.e. cell phone pouches, right? So we've got to put those rocks in first, and then that gives us what we're working with. And then at that point, the justification and the rationale piece come in. But there are not infinite resources. We have to get the revenue piece correct. If it is a new proposal, obviously the justification, how is it evidence-based? You know, where has it worked in other places? You got to make a really good argument for why we need to be trying this. And if it's something that we've been doing, I'm going to ask you to show me the data. Show me where it has worked. And if it has, and I think in just a second when Ms. Taylor gets up and presents, you'll have an opportunity to hear how we're doing that now at the mid-year point. So I'm not waiting until the end. I know we potentially have some resources that look to be unspent as we go into second half of the year. Why am I going to wait until May and do a spend down? When now I know we have things that are working, so I need to reallocate funds to the things that are working and defund some things that just aren't getting traction right now.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Dr. Brinkman, I just had one more question. And I think it's brief. So that's very helpful, and I would love for us to start, if we knew the amount of revenue that we were that was projected for the year, I'd like to start there rather than building a budget and then trying to decide, oh my goodness, the revenue's not going to be what we need. Should we be looking at a millage rate, you know?
I've heard both from the board. I've heard what you're saying, and then I've also, last year, I think the guidance was build the ideal budget, and we'll figure out how to get there.
Yeah,
So I think there's two different approaches. I just need guidance on which approach.
Well, we can, I won't edit other people's opinions. I will invite us to look at what we did the years that we built the ideal master budget and then tried to subtract it. The feedback about that process from the superintendent wasn't very positive about being nickeled and dimed and just the process of trying to do that. But we can talk about that another time. But if that's what people want to do, I'm on board. My question is about money available at the school for auxiliaries and other activities that that typically is paid for by the student fund, student account. One of the concerns I have about my question is about the transparency of the money that is available in the schoolhouse, that is available at the site for different activities. One of the concerns that I have is when I see organizations fundraising for things that actually should be accommodated by the school, or that the school even has money for. Like, we'll look at a grant and we're like, hey, there's money in this grant for this thing. And then I'm at a stoplight and I really don't like the stoplight fundraisers. And they're also illegal. They're not, like, they're against our policy. But to have young people with buckets or boots at stoplights fundraising, and then they come to the car and I say, hey, what are you fundraising for? I'm fundraising for X. And I'm like, we're supposed to be paying for that. And so my question is, clearly, folks would not go through the effort of that kind of fundraiser, go through all that, if they felt they could just ask for the funds and receive what they needed. So how are we building transparency and communication with the schoolhouse stakeholders so that they know what's available to them and what is their responsibility to generate? Is our transparency and our process that we're doing up through our ranks finding its way from the principal level down through the community?
And if I can just initially respond to that, and then Shannon, I'll kick it over to you. We have not taken the robust nature in which we're doing this at the district office down to the schools yet. So I'll be 100% transparent around that. Finding the time to be with the principals amongst other priorities we have in the district to bring a lot of this training and mindset shift has not occurred. It does need to occur, and it will occur. I also just want to double tap the fact that there is money at the school level, and oftentimes it is left on the table. And I can give you examples. My second year here, I gave every principal a strategic grant of, I believe, around $90,000, and said, go do something innovative, spend this money, and it wasn't spent. So it's a mindset shift. I think our district operates sometimes like we're impoverished, and there are funds that are available and can be used, but for whatever reason, people hold on to them. So I think the first phase of that is really having Dr. Barnes's team, when they are going in to do school visits, a part of his iteration of site visits to schools is we're going to pull out the budget and we're going to look at it. And we're going to talk about what you have and what you're using and what you're not using and why. I also get asked for monthly, our budget department, to send me by department and by school what each school has spent to date versus what they've budgeted. I have not pressed at the school level yet, but it is coming. Because I don't understand why we're having fundraisers either. I don't understand why I get emails from teachers asking me to buy incentives for, like, I don't understand that. And then I go look at a budget and I say, there's money there. Why are you asking for this when the money is available to you? So I think a lot of this is it's just a mindset shift that we have not gotten down to the school level yet. But there has been almost nothing that has come to me that I've said no to. In fact, I've said yes, and here's extra. Go spend it, and it doesn't get spent.
I got everybody on the list, so don't think that I haven't seen hands go up. Ms. Campbell, then Dr. Howard Hall, then I've got Ms. Hall again, and then Reverend Smith.
Thank you for this. This is great. So great that all of this is going to center for me around long-term sustainability. So one clarifying question. We are not planning to continue using vacancy savings as a contingency buffer, is that right?
That is the goal, right? So the
Okay.
goal is to, instead of saying, oh, we know that we're gonna be 20% vacant, excuse me, at the end of the year, and so, we'll sort of be able to sprinkle that on other things. The idea is to like say, okay, we're gonna take that head, sort of, it's right now budgeted as a position. We take that out of the budget as a position, and then we can deploy it for some of the things that Dr. Watts was talking about, like programs that we know are working, but we need to expand them. We take that money from positions that are kind of being held open and deploy that into those resources. So you're able to more strategically plan for things rather than having to maybe do a spin down where you're kind of buying things at the end. You're able to start with that money and build it into how you're going to execute throughout the year. Thank you.
Awesome. I like that it'll be, when it's programmed that way, it'll be visible to the board and the community too at large, but mostly for the board if it can't be public facing. Do we have any idea yet what percentage of our departments will be on the more modified zero-based budgeting framework by fiscal year 2027?
Yeah, so all the departments.
All
are
of
going.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Wonderful, love that. Okay. And then what is the oversight to make sure that if there is any resistance or like lack of awareness, you spoke of the mindset shift that needs to happen, and that makes sense, right? If we've done something the same way all the time. Going forward with the sustainability piece, what kind of oversight are we thinking through that's going to help us sustain this long-term once A&M is gone, so that if reductions need to happen or changes need to be made based on the zero-based budgeting framework and the ROI model, that it's happening and it's happening with fidelity?
Yeah, I can start with that, Dr. Watts, if you have sort of other points. One of the things I think about how we are sort of advancing ROI, the program inventory, as well as this process, right, is making sure that it's a lot more, I would say, quantitatively and data-based. And so getting people into like this year is going to be different, right? It's the program inventory, even sort of in doing it prior years, that was a new muscle. This process is going to be like 2 new muscles, right? And so the idea that it's somehow going to just, flip on and everyone's going to go is, as you said, kind of unrealistic, right? And so I think starting to build the framework for which people are operating on, that's why we think the process and clearly documenting it and what the expectations of that are so important, so that it's clear that as we're going through, I am expected to be able to say for each of my programs, this is what my expected outcome is for next year. I'm tracking it throughout the year. When it comes to budget season, I need to have my data ready so that when I'm going into my request, it's backed up. I know I can't just say, we spent this last year, we're spending it again. So that sort of muscle, I think, is new, right, and is developing. But the more you sort of work with it, it becomes maybe not second nature, but more sort of innate in how you think about building your budget.
It's
rather than
building
just-
new habits. It's
Right.
really
Yeah.
habits, protocols, and practices. My first 2 years here, there were very seldom times that we brought budget into cabinet meetings. Now, every single month, every chief gets their budget to actual. We sit in cabinet meeting, we go through that. I ask questions, we talk about, maybe where things aren't being spent and how we need to reallocate. That's a new practice. So, and then we codify things in templates. So with a new budget template, it can be sustained that people will be using that moving forward. So to what you just heard, then it just becomes a part of how we do things. So for me, I guess it's both an art and a science. You have to codify things, but you also just have to build a new muscle and a new mindset. And that's the art side of it.
I
And
would
one
say
question.
The idea of just.
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, what Dr. Watts was saying about talking about your budget monthly and like that exercise is so important because it's very easy to like take budget hat off until next year, right? And like the budget is the fuel by which you're able to do what you need to do. And if you're not thinking about that, how you're using that strategically on an ongoing basis, when you have to get to the budget cycle, like it's like starting from scratch. And so I think that exercise is definitely helpful.
One thing that I agree, I think that's very smart and proactive. I think, one thing I just thought of that I know has been discussed in several meetings is that when we have these extra funds, and it's from vacancies, et cetera, or what Dr. Watts was referencing when it comes to teachers having these, large allowances of money that don't get spent down, and maybe it's a mindset shift that needs to happen. I know we have a lot of funds that go to unallocated. Would it be helpful for us to, which I mean, I could argue either way for, because if you have too many fund types and, where everything's going is oddly specific and there are a million of them, then where do you pull from and who knows what they all are? But would it be helpful to maybe allocate them with a little bit more purpose when this happens? Is that what you mean by programming it and making it visible?
Yeah, I think everything that we're able to program, tied to a program, tied to sort of outcomes, we want to do that as much as possible. That creates some of the transparency that we've been talking about, and it allows you to think about, when we think about the strategic budgeting, right, if we have a big pot of money that we're like, we'll spend it in some way, it's not as strategic as when we're thinking about where we start, where we want to end, and how we're going to deploy resources against that. And so our goal is to put as much of the resource through that process, so that when we're thinking about how we're spending those resources over the course of the year, we have kind of a plan.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Howard Hall?
Good morning, and thank you for your presentation. You alluded earlier about is what we spend and how we spend it, or why we spend it, and I'd add on how we spend it. And I'd like to say that I'm happy to see our Title I program department out there today, our Title I program managers, because we know the hard work that they do, and also our 21st century director. We talked about it just a few minutes ago concerning vacancies. And I know that the budgeting department is inundated with budget transfers and budget amendments at the end of the year due to vacancies. So what would be the process for a new allocation strategy? Say right now it's mid-year, and we have those vacancies, especially in our federal programs, how they can begin to reallocate those funds so that our students can benefit and get what they need now, as opposed to waiting until the end of the year and using those funds basically for professional development for teachers.
Yeah,
for
I'm not going to
example.
steal
They're
too
gonna
much
talk
of,
about that,
Ms. Taylor's thunder, so you'll get that from her, but that's impressive.
Yeah, it's coming.
Ms. Hall, you had another comment?
Since Mr. Smith hasn't had a chance, I can wait and let him go first.
Reverend?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Happy New Year to you. And also, I would like to ask a question. We were talking earlier about the programs and how programs would be cut or supported based on its success. I wanted to kind of chime in and ask a question on how would we be reviewing the strength of a program? Will it be on the yearly basis, or bi-yearly basis?
Yeah, so I think our recommendation and some things we're working with the team on is how do we set up, right now when we think about it, it's kind of annually as a part of this budget process, but it's really hard to kind of like do that once a year. And we think there needs to be a mechanism by which these things are tracked throughout the year. So I think as we think about, and I'm not going to talk any more about ROI, but as we think about the maturity.
The questions that you're asking are coming
Yes,
from
they're
other
coming,
other
yeah. As we
presentations.
think about the maturity, that's something that will come, and we'll have a more sort of robust and continuous monitoring program.
Because there's sometimes when you need to get a whole new event, but there are also times when it needs to be reshaped. So I just
Yes.
wanted to kind of see how
Yes.
that looks.
Yes,
But okay,
yes, yes.
thank you.
I was so encouraged to hear Dr. Watts say that she had already given teachers the opportunity to innovate with $90,000, because I was a little worried once we start, because we do have a scarcity mindset throughout this county. And once you start deciding that something's going to occur because it already worked, then that can stifle innovation and anything fresh and new. So I'm happy to hear that. The other thing, it tickles me that we're sitting here, 8 of us, so innocently, while she says the chiefs will be in her ear about what they want, as though we politicians won't also be in her ear, you know.
That is very true.
So
Thank you.
yeah, that's making me laugh. We're sitting here all quiet and, you know, and professional, and know that we are the ones who inundate her, you know, much more, and we don't have the data that she's demanding that they have. So I just hope everybody's ready to be on this new, fresh train ride that we're going on, and will behave accordingly.
Good point, very good point. Thank
Ms.
you for
Grabowski?
that.
And then I'm going to make a quick comment, and then we got to move on so we don't run out of time.
I know, I saw the face. I'll make it quick. So I listened to the presentation on the way here. Thank you. I'm sorry I was late. I was very happy to hear Dr. Watts talk about the monthly updates, because that was one of my questions, so thank you for that. Looking towards when we start to actually look at the budget, do you anticipate that it will look different than what we have seen in the past? And I hope the answer is, because in the past, we get, you know, these really huge buckets of dollars, and it's really hard to understand what's behind the screen. And we can have, maybe that's a later conversation, but just curious if you
I
anticipate
can give you
actual-
a preview, but I think that's something that will evolve as we think about
Okay.
what's the right way to present the data as the strategic plan continues to evolve. But we are now thinking about how do we sort of set up the request template so that we can easily cut the data to be able to have, this is how much we're spending, you know, by department, but this is how much we're spending by priority. These are the things, this is what we're spending on mandates versus priorities. So we're starting to think through kind of how we can summarize some of the detail in a more executive, sort of board-facing level that'll allow you to sort of get a good view of sort of how the resources are being allocated without having to get too deep into the weeds and things like that. So that's
Okay.
something that's a part of how, when we think about presenting the budget out, will be a part of that exercise.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Quickly, I just want to hit on a couple points. I wanted to thank everyone that's in the process currently, but everyone that's listening that's a part of the process as well. That goes all the way down to the teacher, the custodian, anybody who has an idea, a proposal, that we have to have a mindset change, both on, I've always had this money, be prepared to tell us why you still need to have that money and what is your metric that's going to change. And then hearing that we aren't spending money at the school level, I think is also going to be a massive discontinue the default of, I've been told no once, so I'm not going to ask. It's not all going to happen in this budget cycle. I think we as board members are like, yay, we got something new, boom, it's done. It's not. This is going to be a couple years before I think we really are at that school level budgeting. But I want everyone in the district that actually listens to some of these meetings to understand that when you have that idea, when you have that proposal, it has to start somewhere. It's going to have some numbers behind it, thought process behind it, a budget line behind it, that you can bring that forward, that it's not a no, that we need those people that are innovative. I had somebody grab me at the expo this weekend wanting to start a program. I'm like, develop it. Get the numbers, bring it forward. We can't stifle people at the school level. It's got to start from there and go back and forth. Also, just on the revenue side of the thing, we set our revenue, the 9 of us. Okay, we set the revenue. We know what, if we keep everything the same, it would be, so we can kind of get that idea. But the budget should lead us to understand, can we shrink what we need to grab from the county because we're meeting all of our proposals? Or is there something, as Ms. Hall alluded to, that's a proposal from us, i.e. we feel all staff need this push on their pay, and this is where we're going to have to change the revenue. So I think we just have to remember that it really does come down to us. You know, we want out there to really run the house, but then we can look at some of those bigger picture items of like, we've got to make sure our staff stay, our teachers stay. And that's a proposal that, yes, could come from the superintendent, but I think can also come from us. And then we have to make those hard decisions as board members on, are we shrinking the budget because we're meeting everything? And the district is telling us that we're meeting everything? Or there's a new proposal that has all the data behind it that is run in other school districts across the nation and is making a difference in something that we support, and then we've got to set the revenue to make sure that happens as well. So, again, I think we all see something bright and shiny and new, and we're like, it's going to happen now. It's going to happen better this year, and it's going to happen better every year as it becomes a new memory muscle, of mindset. So thank you so much.
And as Ms. Taylor begins to transition to the podium for the sake of time, you all know at some point, I am going to present to you what our district priorities are for next school year. And then you're going to get the poll to do on your phone to tell me which ones resonate with you. And then you will also get the opportunity to say, what are the things that we think are important? I know you all sometimes will roll your eyes at that exercise, but I have to have that information to build out a budget. I have to know what it is you all think is a priority, because that is data and information that guides our departments and will sometimes mean something that we wanted, we don't get, because what you wanted takes precedence sometimes, right? So I'm just preparing you to go ahead and start your list of things. So when the doodle poll comes and I ask you to get out your phone and put that information in there, I don't get the eye roll. It is a very important part of this process. It's not just an activity we do. We also send out a survey to the community, and we say, you tell us what you think is important. That may seem compliance-oriented. That is data that is used. So I think there are multiple opportunities, not just department chiefs and schools that guide the budget process. It really is a collective opportunity. But if you, by default, don't put your voice in the process, I can't read a mind.
Yes, Dr. Hotchins-Brown.
Thank you. It's just the timeliness of that poll. Getting a poll right after a presentation is challenging for me. I
Got
need
it.
time to ruminate over what we've received. So to get something and then say, okay, now prioritized.
I got it.
My brain doesn't work that way. And so I've been the one complaining. and that's part of been my complaint. Not the request for feedback, but how soon I'm supposed to have an opinion over something I just learned.
Got it. That makes good sense. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And really quick, sorry, David. So the other piece, for me, along with what Dr. Hoskins-Brown just said, was that it's not just the timeliness for me, that is also a hindrance, but it's not knowing what we're starting with. And so I feel like being able to express wants, needs, priorities, all of that is good, but I really do think it's good that we're showing the efficacy behind why we're choosing to fund certain things. And then if we have a wants list, but we don't know what we're starting with, I don't want it to just end up on the budget if it's going to overextend us or ask more from taxpayers.
And that is the most challenging piece, and where we have to build our capacity, which I hope A&M helps us with more accurate forecasting. So we don't really know what we're going to have. Like it's never like a perfect science. We think we know what we're going to get in terms of property taxes. We think we know what the millage rate is going, but we don't know until we know.
I guess it's less what we're going to have and more what we need already at baseline to sustain and to do well for our students.
I got it.
And then going from there and saying, okay, now let's blue sky think, and then go from there.
Got it.
But not necessarily what we're going to get.
Good morning. As we, I was trying to wait there, but as we transition to the next section of the presentation, we'll provide a brief update on our ROI work. And the slide that we're going to start with is not, there we go, is not new information, but I do want to reintroduce or ground the conversation in the reality or the constraints in which we're operating in. Specifically, we are navigating constrained budgets driven by declining federal funding and shifting enrollment. At the same time, costs are continuing to rise, particularly for programs and personnel, as well as operational expenses. And then student needs are increasing, which require greater instructional and wraparound support. And all of this is happening amid ongoing uncertainty around funding at both the state and federal level. So for me, what ROI provides for us is a disciplined way in which we make strategic decisions within the context, ensuring that our investments are both impactful and strategic. And you heard A&M kind of talk about those guiding principles around impact, strategy, and trade-off. Now we'll move to another slide that you've seen before. And this is a pyramid that illustrates really our ROI work. One of the things that I want to point out is that ROI, or our ROI work, is a journey and not a destination. So it's not we're done with ROI. It's kind of like the budgeting process, that it's ongoing. And as you look at this diagram, what I want to point out is that we are at the foundational stage and we're moving toward strategic. And what we have done thus far is we've established a shared definition of ROI. We've also built, and you've had a chance to experience, our first program inventory. And I think the most important part is what the conversations previously revealed, is that we are building or shifting the mindset around what we spend, the impact it has, and what should we expect as a result of that spend. And as we move to get deeper into the strategic level of our ROI work, we'll now be focusing on ensuring that ROI is implemented consistently or used consistently as we look to link ROI directly with our district budget strategy and planning, and also embedding the ROI lens as we look at our priorities and what we will prioritize as we develop our strategic plan, as well as what we'll fund. And then also, we really want to, and again, conversation has already been had around this, but I do want to just touch briefly, this whole notion of supporting leaders to think in a certain way. In particular, the way our team captures it is to think like an investor. So you have a portfolio, and what are you going to invest on based on what your returns are? Here is linked directly to the conversation that A&M started around what are the things that we look at as we talk about ROI and as we evaluate each decision using ROI. We're looking at strategic value, and when we look at strategic value, what we're really essentially doing is asking ourselves, does this investment align to our strategic priorities? And then we move from strategic alignment to evidence of impact, and that's that whole piece around what is the data telling us, both qualitative and quantitative, if it's working and for whom is it working for. And then finally, what stewardship trade-offs could we potentially make? So if we fund this, what choice are we making? Or when we make funding decisions, can we trade off funding one thing for another based on performance, and then also the functionality or usability of that particular investment? And these three lenses lead us to make the determination whether we'll stop, start, continue, or adjust a program. You'll also notice, and you've heard, but I cannot not mention this whole thing around shifting toward a zero-based budget. So programs are no longer continued by default. Like you've heard earlier, the justification must be clear, and most importantly, the metrics for success must be there. And so we have to really know, what does this mean around impact? Here's the fun stuff. We're going to transition, and I'm excited about this. Well, it's fun to me.
I'm glad it's fun to y'all.
My favorite slide in the whole presentation. Yes. Is we wanted to bring to you a concrete example of how this is actually working in action. And so you may or may not recall, last budget season, we funded a program, Studies Weekly, and this was selected as a program to support content area literacy, particularly in science and social studies. And the intent was to increase access to grade level informational texts. And what our academic instructional team did is they gathered multiple sources of evidence to assess the impact. And what they found was that this investment did not have a strong alignment between the Georgia standards for science. Also, the Lexile levels did not consistently align across grade levels. And then, in addition to looking at that, they also collected teacher feedback. And what the teachers told them was that this resource was challenging to implement. So rather than going into FY '27 saying, we're going to fund this again in the same way, we used what we learned about it, or we're using what we learned about it to look at how we adjust and potentially change the contract. And so what we're anticipating doing is removing the science component, because we know that there's a misalignment with standards, and then we want to add, or the team will add, the 8th grade social studies, because that's a tested grade, and this particular resource has a strong alignment around social studies standards. And then also, instead of just saying we're going to purchase this program for every grade band the same way, in the same form, what the team decided to do is adjusted the purchasing model based on the instructional match as it relates to usage. So instead of getting print and digital for every grade band, what the team is looking to do is get print and digital resources for K-5, because that matches or supports their instructional model, and then digital resources only for grades 6 through 8, because that matches and supports their instructional model. And again, I do want to point out that we are taking into account qualitative data, so hearing directly from teachers, school leaders around how is this really showing up in your day-to-day work, and how is this making a difference. But the ultimate goal in this example, or the ultimate impact in this example, is that the contract will be reduced from $900,000 to $500,000, realizing us almost $400,000 in savings, which is a 44% reduction. And so this is just one example of many. And so we have some where we are adjusting contracts. We have some in which we'll be discontinuing. And then you'll hear later about some that we want to scale and increase based on the outcomes. And so this is an example of kind of what Sheena was talking about when they're sitting in the budget workshops, when the chiefs are in there, and outside of the budget workshops, those ongoing conversations. These are the conversations that they're having, and these are the examples of the artifacts and data that chiefs are asking the program owners to bring to the table as they talk about what should we really be investing in. Okay, Dr. Watts is going to talk a bit about our mid-year return on investment review process. Dr. Watts?
So, as I already mentioned, we do have guiding principles that we are carrying, and they're pervasive in all of our conversations. But you heard me earlier say that in cabinet meetings now, we are bringing the budget into those sessions monthly. And as recent as last Monday, began to talk about how do we codify the criteria we use when we want to make an adjustment mid-year. Why would we wait until the end of the year? What should we be thinking about to make mid-year adjustments? So as you look at this slide, I think what came from those conversations is, obviously, we have to keep strategic goals at the forefront, federal and state policy at the forefront, compliance and safety. So anytime there is a compliance or a safety issue, I'm not going to wait till the end of the year to make that readjustment. That's going to happen immediately. But we also need to look at things like program utilization. Again, we may buy 500 licenses, but we realize teachers are only using 200 of those licenses. We look at our KPIs, we look at the strength of results, we look at cost-benefit analysis. So you can kind of see, here's the criteria that we will use moving forward as we look at making not only our budget development at the end of the year, but how do we make adjustments throughout the year? Because again, I don't believe in a spend down. That philosophical approach does not align with my philosophical financial values or beliefs. So those adjustments will be made on an ongoing basis. You will, in the next few weeks, likely be getting some proposals that need your endorsement and approval, because what we are realizing is that there are places that we need to make early investments or mid-year adjustments. For example, Everyday Labs, that is our attendance pilot that we started. You all will get in your update on Sunday the data that we are seeing coming out of that. It is to be celebrated. So I'm not going to wait to expand that. I can expand that now and get an even greater impact for the remainder of the school year on places where we need to get that impact. High-dose tutoring, you haven't gotten that data yet. I think it's coming to you in Academic Excellence Committee meeting. Outstanding results. Why would I wait until the end of the year and next year try to start that when I can impact kids this year? So you will likely be getting a proposal to expand that. We have a strategic plan that is being developed. By the end of the year, we will need to start onboarding people to that and putting in place the structures and resources so that that plan can begin to get traction very early into next year. We will need to make some investment there. When we think about safety, playgrounds, we have some of our playgrounds that are out of compliant. I'm not going to say that they're unsafe, but they're not optimal in terms of how they're working for kids. And our schools and our operations team have been nickel and diming how we get those playgrounds up to standard. And quite frankly, the fact that we haven't pulled the trigger on this, to me, is like not acceptable. Let's get the playgrounds up to standard. Let's get the playgrounds covered so that kids aren't out in 100-degree. We have the money to do that now. Why would I wait? So you'll begin to see that coming to you in the next few weeks. Cell phone pouches, I cannot wait until July 1st to buy those. We have to get those now. We know that you all have just passed your policy. We want to get those in place so that teachers and principals can interact with those before the school year ends, so that when we come in next school year, we're not learning something and touching something new for the first time. We can hit the ground running. So I just wanted to provide for you some insight into, when I say a reallocation of resources, what is coming down the pike and how we're making decisions about how to reallocate those resources. I hope that makes sense.
All right. So that sets us up perfectly to look at one of the examples that we are considering as a mid-year adjustment. And this is, again, another way that we get to see ROI in action. And this example shows, again, how ROI is informing decision-making in real time. You may recall we came to you to introduce and garner support around investing in Ignite as a high-dosage tutoring pilot. And this pilot is really linked directly to supporting foundational literacy. So we're taking the approach that we understand that foundational literacy is a critical driver in ensuring that students can read on grade level. And so what we did is we intentionally launched a small pilot with Ignite to learn quickly and be in the position to decide if we needed to scale or not. And what the early evidence is showing us that we have 100 second and third graders that were served across the school district, and we have an 81% attendance rate. So students are actually attending and participating in the program, and within 7 weeks, students receiving tutoring nearly doubled their Amira reading mastery compared to students who were not receiving this high-dosage tutoring. Hearing from principals, we've gotten very positive feedback. Specifically, one of the things that principals highlighted is that Ignite embeds very smoothly or seamlessly within their existing intervention framework, so it didn't feel like one more thing that they had to do. Also, as we consider mid-year adjustments, what we're thinking about is how we could expand within the current sites. So the schools that already have Ignite, how could we expand there? And then we're also exploring what opportunities we have to expose students beginning in the summer to Ignite. And then we're also continuing to closely monitor fidelity and outcomes, because we recognize that if the program isn't used with integrity, that we won't get the outcomes. So we are very deliberate and diligent around monitoring the implementation. And then what we want to do is increase Ignite, and what this would mean financially, depending on what the increase or scale looks like, is it could be an investment from $200,000 to $1 million. And so in the current sites, obviously it's a smaller investment, but if we were wanting to do something district-wide or something broader, it could cost more, because like Dr. Watts has alluded, we're seeing the results, and we know that students are at a position that if they participate or engage, they could be benefiting from these outcomes. And so this is an example of what a mid-year adjustment thinking looks like in real time. Before we get to feedback and discussions, I do want to quickly highlight what our next steps are around ROI. I am most excited, and I hope you could hear the through line from A&M's presentation and what I briefly shared, is that ROI is now directly driving or being embedded into our budget process. And previously, we were building the muscle, but there wasn't the connectivity. So we're excited about that, and we're continuing to be sure that as we go into budget season as well as mid-year adjustments, that we're using ROI evidence. We're also going to be a part of the conversation in the planning sessions. And so Heather from my team is there with the chief. So if they have questions or need support around ROI work, the program inventory, our team is there to support that. And then we'll also be updating our program inventory based on outcomes from last school year and early outcomes that we're receiving. As data comes in, we're updating our program inventory. And then also what's important to think about as our next steps for ROI is it's not void of the strategic plan conversation. So as we're having our conversation around the strategic plan, it is very important that as the priorities develop, that what our investments feed into are what those things are that we say are our priorities. So we're making sure that our strategic plan work is also linked to the budget planning process. And that is really where we are, and we're excited about the progress, and I'm open to any questions or discussion that you might have.
Dr. Hoskins-Brown, then Ms. Hall, then Ms. Grabowski.
Thank you. I have two questions and a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
So the hardest question is first. What is the difference between ROI applications in private industry, where the performers are dollars, and education, where the performers are people? And I'm okay if you get back to us on that.
I would like to
get,
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
thoughtful about that.
Yes,
Okay.
we're happy to do that.
All right, thank you. And then my comment about the contract reduction on the
Yes.
Studies Weekly, I really appreciate that we made the change and responded to teachers talking about the application of that. Sometimes when you get a new tool at the workplace, supervisors say, make it work, try harder, it'll work. And I mean, I had this experience with a piece of equipment, paid $100,000 for it. Technician kept coming in and wasn't working properly. And I kept thinking it was me. My students thought it was them. And find out they changed manufacturers, and that equipment never worked as well as it did when they had the original manufacturer. So we're spending 4 years trying to make something work.
Right.
And, damaging our self-esteem. And it wasn't even us, it was the equipment. I really appreciate that we listened to our teachers to know it wasn't a good fit for us. So kudos on that. And then my question is, on slide 16, with Ignite, really glad that that's working well. Glad to see the analogous approach in the other direction of utilizing these data to make a greater investment. My question is, we've been talking about a really hardcore retention policy this year. Do we know the cost of a total retention policy and how Ignite may defray the costs? So Ignite is helping people do better, so they're not necessarily going to be retained. But if we do look towards really retaining students for performance, then that has all kinds of financial consequences. Do we know for this additional investment in Ignite how it may help us with savings as well as performance for young people who may be retained?
So we haven't done the financial model
Right.
or the impact of how having an intervention like this could reduce, but we know there'll be a reduction if this continues to be positive, but we don't have like concrete numbers to show that yet. And we do need to revisit that retention policy, because I think that would be an important informer as we think about the policy change.
Ms. Hall, then Ms. Grabowski, and then Dr. Honeyroll.
Before I retired, I spent 3 years at Thunderbolt School as an early intervention teacher. Children would come to me each period for 45 minutes for intensive reading instruction. I got to pretty much choose the materials and that kind of thing. How is that different from the Ignite high dosage tutoring program? Can you explain to me?
Sure.
And will that mean that that position as those early intervention teachers will no longer be needed?
So this is another type of intervention. It doesn't replace any intervention that's already happening in the schools. This is another form of intervention, and you may remember when we first talked about it, it's computer-based, so they interact with a tutor on the computer, and so they are getting one-on-one tutoring, but it's happening from it's virtual, so it's digital. So they go into a space, we have a curated space where students who are receiving Ignite high dosage tutoring, they go to that space 15 minutes a day. How many days a week? 5. So every day for 15 minutes a week, for 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, they go into the space and they interact virtually with a tutor.
I see, okay. So that's very good for you to clarify that, because what I noticed in my experience, it helped those children to have a real person talking to them. So the fact that we're going to have both is very good. I was worried that with this success, maybe that meant we would no longer have a teacher actually interacting with the child on a eye-to-eye level. But we'll have both, which will just make it even better.
And I'll allow Shra to add a little bit more context.
Hi. Ignite only focuses on foundational literacy, phonics, phonemic awareness. So those EIP students may need fluency support. They may need vocabulary support, and that is not where Ignite lives. So that's where the teacher or another intervention is essential, and we have to meet every kid where they are in that tier 2 space. So that it is one option of many.
If you said phonics and
Foundation, phonemic awareness, so those foundational literacy skills, if we're looking at the reading rope, the lower part of the reading rope. So those that's why it is for the early grades.
Now, Dr. Michael, that's something we have to wait till next year to broaden?
So my team should already know the answer to this question as well, because what I said to them is, I'm not waiting. We are going to find the money to expand now. What the discussion is, so the other piece you have to take into account, and I've talked about this before with the board, is it sounds good to say here, sitting up here, let's just expand it. But all of this is happening at the school level. There's a change management process that has to go with this. This is not the only thing a principal and teachers are trying to do. So what I can't do is go too big, and then we can't manage it. The fidelity erodes. So we're trying to figure out, like, what's the sweet spot? How big do we go? That's why you see a range of 500 to 1 million. Because what I don't want to do is allow us to be so robust that we lose the fidelity of the program. So once we make those decisions, we will expand mid-year. So in February, we expect some expansion.
Yeah, let's keep it short. We have 2 more presentations, and Dr. Watts, if you'll think about which one of those you find most important for us to hear, because we've talked a lot this morning. Thank you.
Okay.
And that's on us.
I'll make it quick. Fabulous work. Thank you. It's very exciting, especially to see the examples, and absolutely love the teacher feedback. Can you go back to 14 real quickly? So the teacher feedback is just amazing and essential, and at some point, and maybe this can be sidebar, I'd love to understand more about the methodology of how we're receiving that feedback from
Absolutely.
our teachers, and if all of our teachers have the opportunity to provide feedback, because I do think that that's important, that we're providing that opportunity. And a little bit of a devil's advocate, for these programs where we see, and the other thing I love about these examples is it includes the why. So to me, the why is always so important in understanding why something is or isn't working. So if we have, and Dr. Watts used the example, if we have, 500 seats of something and only 200 seats are being used, do we need to scale back? Like, before we scale back, are we understanding the flip side of why is it working so well for the 200, and are the other
Yes.
300 seats not being used because of the cultural
Yes.
shift that's needed to take in that new? So if you can talk just a minute about understanding both sides of the coin.
So thank you for bringing it out. We are looking at it from both perspectives, and I think an example would be Amira. We didn't present that as an example, but we looked at Amira, and much of it was around usage and implementation. So instead of saying that we're going to reduce, what we did, or what Mr. Butler's team did with the support and partnership of the schools team, is we looked at implementation. So we supported teachers and school leaders around implementation so that we could see the impact that the program was designed to do. So I think for me what's important, and I heard the word iterative used, and so it's a conversation, and it is iterative, and it involves triangulating data. So it's not just taking one perspective or one source of data, but it's looking at a variety of things and then using the criteria to make a determination whether or not we should start, continue, or quite frankly, adjust.
Okay, thank you.
Who is next? Oh, Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. This is great work. My background, of course, is early childhood, elementary education. But my question is, do you have a brief overview of the return on investment at the middle school and high school level in different divisions? Because I see we're doing a lot in the lower level, and also a brief assessment, maybe not right now, of school culture. What's the state of the school culture and climate as of now?
Yes, we can bring that in subsequent conversations. Thank you.
So have there been programs that we've ID'd for, this is my favorite thing that we do here in the cabinet is ROI. Have we ID'd programs that have been fully discontinued yet, or are we have, rather than just reduced because of lack of ROI?
Yes, we will have programs that we will fully reduce, some that we will adjust, and some that we will increase. And
Okay.
again,
Oh, I'm
because, I'm sorry, no, you're fine. Because of the time frame, we just wanted to provide a teaser or a snippet, and then also in subsequent committee and informal meetings, you'll hear things like you'll get a chance to dive deeper into Ignite at the Academic Excellence Committee meeting with Dr. Barnes and Mr. Butler. And so these are just examples, but we do have start, stop, continues, and adjust.
Awesome. And I guess the reason I asked you is because one of my follow-up questions to that is, you know, which of these mid-year reallocations require board approval versus administrative discretion? And not just because I think we should have our hands on everything, but because I think it's good for the public to hear when we ask for more money for Ignite, and most of us support that because it's so successful in helping kids learn to read, that they also see that we're not just doing that across the board, that you're not just asking for more money for us to vote on, you're showing us as well that things are getting cut. So, and then have we linked this ROI stuff to how we're gonna set the millage rate? Is that a question? Like, is it getting directly linked to that?
Will be an important link
Okay.
to that, yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank
That's
you.
the revenue side, right? That's the side that is, it's not as easy to be concrete about. So, but that is a process as it relates to forecasting that we want to improve.
And A&M is supporting us around that work.
Mr. Moss?
Okay, I'll be brief. First, questions. Do the organizations that we are analyzing, when we go into contracts with these organizations, do we give them the measures that they will be?
Not
Not yet.
currently, but
That's-
as we look,
yeah.
we want to
That's-
get into performance-based contracting.
Good, thank you.
And we've researched that, and there are some places in Georgia that are doing it well. So
Good.
Heather has spent some time studying that, and as we move forward and think about what stewardship looks like in our next strategic plan, that will be something that you're seeing more of. We have not done that explicitly, but because we needed to get clear around our expectations and our metrics, but as we go into the next phase of this work, that's definitely something that's on the horizon.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Okay, that's one. Two, and this is just a general comment, something that I would like the board to really consider. And it's around communications and involvement of our public in our budgeting. And we can discuss this at our retreat. But I want us to entertain more opportunities for the public to comment on what goes on in these committee meetings. And I'll give you an example. What if, I'm not saying we're going to do it, so don't say I said it, we were gonna do it. What if the next time our board members are at neighborhood meetings, neighborhood association meetings, we could take someone with us to discuss how we're doing ROI and how we're doing the budget.
Absolutely.
And also provide us a way to get feedback from those neighborhood associations on how we're doing it.
Yep, it is definitely something we would be open to and we think would be beneficial. I do want to go back just a bit.
Yeah.
I won't get into the details, and it wasn't driven by us per se, but Ignite, part of their model is they do guarantee what the results will be, and the results that they told us that we would get if we implemented with Fidelity, we've seen that, and in some places exceeded that. So that is not happening across every contract, but that is an example of where it's emerging. But I do want to point out that that's a part of their model.
Love it.
They're a private company, but they're a public benefit corporation, right? So you have like purely, revenue, profit-driven corporations, but their ROI, their outcomes are partially like revenues, but mostly impact. So their funding streams, their investors are investing in them based on the impact they deliver. And that's actually something to consider when building partnerships is what is the company's incorporation status? Are they a purely profit-driven company, or are they considering outcomes in their ROI models and outcome model?
That's good. I'm done.
Let's enroll some students. And we have to cut by 10:20, class, so that the back of the booth can get ready for the informal meeting.
Good morning. I'm Paige Cooley, the Budget Director, as most of you know. And I'd like to say this morning, the Finance Advisory Committee will share projected enrollment trends for SCC PSS and explain what those projections mean for our budget planning, as well as our staffing levels over the years. These projections are going to help us ensure that our financial decisions remain aligned with student needs and community growth. On this slide, you see we have three main funding sources. I'm going to give an overview of each of the different funding sources. The first one is federal. The second one's state, and the third one is our local funding source. Federal funds are restricted and can only be used for specific programs. State funding is mostly based on enrollment and state formulas, which is what we're discussing now. That's how we get most of our state funding is from the enrollment. Local funding gives the district flexibility and helps cover costs that aren't fully funded elsewhere. And why this is important is we have to balance these sources in order to budget for long-term planning. Enrollment forecast processing. This slide explains how the school district estimates future student enrollment so we can plan responsibly and determine staff for the school sites. We start with reliable population data, and we include census information and state and local population data. We look at what's happening in the community, such as birth rates, new housing, and how students move through grade levels. We also listen closely to our school leaders because the principals and administrators often see changes before they show up in the data. An example of this would be if an apartment complex is being built in a neighborhood which they anticipate housing many families with school-age children. We may not be aware of this when we're doing it, but principals can kind of key us in and let us know so we can anticipate if we need to increase their enrollment for the following year. Several district teams review this information together to make sure decisions are well-rounded and responsible. This is not just determined by the finance division. It is an effort that is done district-wide. Currently, we're working with a professional demographer to make sure our projections are accurate and up to date. Once those updated projections are finalized, we're going to share them with the community and use them to guide future planning in our budget.
And I just want to highlight the professional demographer. I think from the finance department side, they're really looking at how enrollment year to year is calculated or projected. Our demographer, who is on board and has given us some initial data that I will be bringing to cabinet soon and then bringing to the board soon, I think it's going to illuminate some things that maybe we did not know. That individual can inform our year-to-year projections around enrollment, but really, we're using them around long-term enrollment and how we look at forecasting in the future, and then how that translates into capital projects, East Blast, and all those things. So we'll continue with the internal model of how we forecast enrollment. The demographer will inform that. And again, I think the data that you're going to see, and I've just had a briefing on it myself, is going to really be an interesting thing for all of us to wrap our brains around as we continue to hear things like growth in West Chatham. That demographer is going to really be able to illuminate, and his accuracy rate, and Megan is here and has had a deeper dive, is phenomenal in working with how many other school districts across the country? Over 200 schools with a remarkable accuracy rate. And so when you see this data, I think it's going to help us in so many ways long-term. But what Paige is really talking about is our year-to-year enrollment and how it drives finances.
Thank you, Dr. Watts. Now that we've talked about how enrollment is forecasted, this slide shows what the numbers actually look like. The trends are important because enrollment directly affects funding and our staffing decisions. The blue line shows projections, and the red line shows actual enrollment. Overall, we've seen a gradual decline in student enrollment. In some cases, actual enrollment came in a little lower than expected, which helps us adjust future projections. Based on the current data, we expect enrollment to continue to slowly decline over the next few years. Knowing this helps us plan ahead for things like teachers, classrooms, and the budget, so we're not caught off guard. And as you can see, our preliminary, before getting together with the demographer, is a projection for next year of 34,417 students. Critical enrollment pressures and Georgia Promise. There are several things happening at the same time that are putting pressure on our student enrollment. Georgia Promise Scholarship is a state-funded scholarship offering up to $6,500 per year per student for certain families. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about this scholarship on the next slide. Some of the other categories that we are experiencing pressure on enrollment is, while our district has many successful programs, public perception varies by school. Families sometimes base decisions on reputation rather than facts, especially when comparing options. Another factor is housing. Housing cost and affordability influence where families choose to live and where children attend school. We're also seeing lower birth rates, which mean fewer children entering schools in the lower grades. Families move more often than they used to, so student mobility and migration also affect enrollment from year to year. State and national data suggests that children from immigrant families may be more likely to attend public schools. Our district must be prepared to support diverse learners, including those from households with varying linguistic and cultural backgrounds. All of these factors combine to help explain why enrollment is declining and why careful planning is very necessary for our district. Deep dive, Georgia Promise Scholarship enrollment impact. The Georgia Promise Scholarship is a new program that was created in 2024, which provides up to $6,500 per student to give families extra help paying for school-related costs like private school, tutoring, homeschooling, books, therapy, and other approved expenses. It's for students who live in areas where public schools are ranked in the lowest 25% of schools in the state. According to First District RESA, which is the Regional Educational Service Agency, as of July 22nd, 2025, there were 427 Georgia Promise Scholarship recipients for fall 2025 in Savannah-Chatham County. This scholarship gives families more school choices, which means some students may leave public schools for private or homeschooling. Because of this, we might see fewer children enrolling, especially in kindergarten, and enrollment numbers could change from year to year. We're keeping a very close eye on this so that we can plan for staffing, classrooms, and resources and make sure every student is supported. Sorry. And if anybody has any feedback or questions at this
Mr. Moss,
time.
and then Mr. Grabowski.
Okay, so I had a question on the promise. So if a school comes off that list and a student has already left our school system and gone to a private school, do they have to come back?
I do not believe so.
We'll take that down as they stay off.
Okay.
Initial response to that is no.
Okay.
And I do think it's important to emphasize here that it's not just the 18 schools, it's any school in their feeder pattern. So it's really 18-plus schools. We have 18 schools that have been identified in the lowest 25%, but the way the program works is, even if a school is not on the list, if a school is in the feeder pattern of one of those 18 schools, those families are also eligible for the Georgia Promise. Does that make sense?
Yes, so our motivation, let's get more of those schools off that list.
Absolutely.
Ms. Grabowski.
Thank you for the presentation. As we were talking about the projections, just a couple of questions. I would really encourage us, or I guess it's more of a statement, to have better partnerships with our local governments in getting their permitting data. We should not have to rely on a principal saying there's a multifamily complex. That permitting data is publicly available. It's just a matter of connecting with the right staff at the local governments. I'm happy to help the team make those connections, but we
That's
should
what
not.
the demographer has been doing.
Okay.
That's exactly
Good.
what the demographer, and
'Cause
he
we-
has to work with all 7 individual.
Absolutely, yeah, it is, but once we get that rhythm established, it should be super easy to get that data and not rely on, oh, by the way, this is going on. Dr. Watts, you made a statement many years ago, or when you first got here, when we were talking about, we have a lot of private schools, about for families who choose private school, that they are going to something, not running from something. And I appreciate that statement very much. And unfortunately, Ms. Cooley, you made the comment that there is this perception, many times a false perception, about some of our schools, our district as a whole. I would love to see us focus more strategically on recruitment. Our communications team is doing a great job. I loved some of the information you sent out with your superintendent's update about the podcast and where are they now. I think those things are excellent and helps to elevate our district. I would love for us to strategically market our advantages. I think it's something that we have not really focused on when we are looking, and we know that that is tied to dollars. So I'll stop there.
And I'll take that to the next level, and I'm trying not to steal the demographer's thunder, but we need to even be more strategic. I think we do a good job of promoting things that go across the whole district
Right.
that make the district great. But if I'm a parent, that sounds great, but I want to know about this school.
Absolutely, yes.
And I think some of the information that you're going to get from the demographer is going to actually show us that we're losing kids in places that we would all deem there's a good school.
Right, right. And I agree 110%. We see our private schools market, we see our charter schools market. They are marketing an individual product, and so we need to market our product in that same way, specific. Yes.
Not just general.
Yes, yes, okay, great. I'm glad there's alignment on that. And then the final comment on the Georgia Promise, there was obviously a big change between the FY '26 10th day count and the projected. Do we feel like a significant portion of that was from Georgia Promise, or do we understand why that delta was so large?
Well, from what we were seeing, we were told that 427 accepted the Georgia Promise Scholarship from Chatham County. Now, they may not have been in our school at the time because they could have done it going into kindergarten, but those are children that we did lose because they did not come to us when they might have come to us otherwise. So out of the 716 kids that we went down on our 10th day from fiscal year '26 compared to fiscal year '25's 10th day, I believe that was 427 of them, right around in there, the 400. So the other 300 or so were based on the birth rate, based on the migration, but, just, we know the other things. So when I looked at coming up with the number that I came up with for next year's projection, which is very preliminary until the demographer looks at it, I essentially took what we had this year and I looked at that, I call that Promise School, the Georgia Promise Scholarship, it's like a voucher.
It is a
And I
voucher,
looked at 3 other states, Indiana, Arizona, and Florida, who have this same sort of program, to see, are we going to see these big losses each time? And what I came up with was that they said that the first year was always a big year for early adopters. The second year is another fairly large year, which you get about 20 to 40% more picking it up based on those other states. And then the third year on, it's a little bit, a lot of the eligible have already accepted it. It's not quite as big a turn. So what I did was I took the amount we had this year, and then I took the low end of that 20 to 40% that usually go in the second year. I only did 20%, and that came to 85 loss of students. But I also figured in losing for other reasons 250 students, which was actually on the lower end too. Just like last year, to preserve our teachers, I didn't want to go to the extreme high end because by 10th day it is so difficult to get a teacher. So that is where I came up with, I subtracted out the 85 from the voucher that we expect, and that's on the low end, and then the 250 from just other reasons that children leave, and that came to minus 335 students off of this year's 10th day. I also had to add in 2 more. We are hoping that we will obtain 2 more pre-K classes. So I added 40 in from that. So that's how my total went to 34,417.
Okay.
So that's how I came up with that number. Now, of course, the demographer, I'm very excited that we have someone else to look at that other than myself, because I had to just kind of base it on past times. And this is a lot different than it has been in the past because we did not have the Georgia Promise until this year, which has made a big difference. But we have been on already, even before that, a steady decline.
Well, and I'm glad we're looking at other states, and I would encourage us to, as we are continuing to monitor this, in many other states, what they have seen is a significant portion of those students who leave end up coming back. So we
We've
need
already
to make
seen
sure
some
we're
of that.
tracking that as well.
We've actually seen that already this year.
Okay. I had
Thank
a
you.
comment.
They gon' We have multiple people that want to make comments, and I feel bad that the whole entire Title I staff has come here, and we're going to short them to 6 minutes. Is there any way that I don't even know if they can get their presentation done in 6 minutes?
We can defer this to the next board meeting.
I hate, and I apologize sincerely that you've sat through the last hour and a half.
Can we
That's not
just
right.
delay the next meeting by 15 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Back of the room, do you understand where we're going? Okay,
Do you need action? I move that, or I think we
I
should?
think we just have to
Okay.
post something and say that we're going to start informal later.
Yeah.
So I had Dr. Howard Hall, then we'll come to Ms. Hall.
I'm not long-winded at all. I just want to add another contributing factor to the decline in student enrollment is athletics. Our top athletes are being recruited as young as 10 years old, so we lose a lot of our great athletes to the private schools due to athletics. And if we want to see a shift in our enrollment, we need to really build our athletic programs.
That is very good point, and you are very
And
right.
it's kind of tied in with the promise too.
Yeah. On that point, and I'm sorry to jump, but they're not supposed to be eligible for another scholarship from that private school, correct? So I don't know how the checks and balances are there, and if the state actually gave us the power to do checks and balances there, but I would love to know how many of them fill out the paperwork for this, but then are also getting some form of a scholarship at a different school.
We don't know, and we have very little insight into what's happening.
Yeah. Ms. Hall?
Okay, basically, Dave, this goes along with what you just brought up. I'm sure there's no one sitting up here who thinks that $6,500 is going to get you enrolled in a private school. So I hope that we're thinking very critically about that the reason for that bill and what it's actually purported to do. But I am asking, you're saying that if my child needed therapy, can I stay at my home school and
No.
get therapy?
Learned that yesterday. In fact, clarity. If you accept the Georgia Promise Scholarship, you have to unenroll in our district.
For at least 1 year, 2
Yes.
semesters, you
So
have to
all
leave.
427 students are no longer students. You have to unenroll.
Okay.
If not, they would be paying out double. They'd be paying for them here for us and then giving another 6,500, so.
I wish our demographer could actually pursue that further and see these families that are leaving to go to private schools, what this $6,500 actually does for that family.
I think we need to also remember that quite a few of these families are using this for homeschooling as well. So that is where you have to, I think people are just assuming they're all going to private school, but quite a
Okay.
number are being homeschooled. We are, we have shown withdrawals for homeschooling, so we know that's where a
So
large
down the
portion-
line, when homeschool, I know there are some homeschool successes, but for those who decide to come back, that's very interesting, Ms. Taylor, about where they are in terms of our performance and achievement data when they return from a homeschool setting as opposed to private school.
Yes, ma'am. And one of the things, in addition to partnering with a demographer, is we're looking to unpack Georgia Promise and the effect that it's having on our district, not only in enrollment, but also around performance.
Thank you.
I do think it's important that people know with the homeschool funding, because there's sometimes a misperception that you can get paid to teach your own child. It is for the resources and the materials that you can access and not to self-fund your teaching.
Thank you. Title I.
Thank you.
Compensatory ed funding, monitoring and impact. Thank you. Thank you for flexibility back there in the back of the house as well.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Dorsey. I'm the Director of Compensatory Programs, and today I will provide you guys with some information about where we landed with our FY25 funds for all of the grants that are in our department, and then a snapshot of where we are with FY26 funds. So the first grant that we have listed here is for our Title I, which provides resources and interventions to our schools that have low-income families. And we started that grant with an original allocation of about $17.7 million. And then with carry forward, we ended up with about $21.3 million. And the actual for that was 84%. Then we also have our Title I funds for school improvement. And last year, we were provided $192,000, and we spent down 80%. And those funds are provided to our targeted schools that have been identified that presented at the last board meeting, and they are our CSI and TSI schools. And then for those CSI schools, they get an additional allocation of $150,000 per school for a literacy coach. And so that is listed here, and $282,000 of that have been spent last year and that gets us to 94%. The next grant is Title IV, Part A, where we got about $1.4 million and spent down to 98.5%. And then Title IV-B, which is our 21st century after-school programs, where we provide academic supports and enrichment, and we spent down to 86% at about $3.2 million for that particular grant. And then our two smallest grants are for residential treatment, and those funds go to Coastal Harbor. And in the McKinney-Vento grant, where we spent down to 100% residential treatment, was allocated $923,000, and McKinney-Vento received $67,000. This next slide goes in to give you a graphic and actually a detailed report of actually what was spent last year, what was put inside of the budget, and then what was actually drawn down and paid out back to the state. To the state. You can see the majority of the Title I funds goes towards salaries and benefits. Then coming in behind that is instructional materials, and then we have membership and dues, which is basically the account line that's used for registration. Then we have travel is PD travel, and professional services. That's the next bulk of where the funds are spent for our Title I dollars. And then here we have a snapshot of where we are currently with this year. As of December, we have drawn down 21%, and the guidance from the state is that we should be at 30% by the end of January. So we're in good standing with our spending. Again, the majority of the funds are allocated towards salaries and benefits. That's 86%. Instructional materials, 3.7%, extended day tutorial, and that would be like our after-school programs as well as Saturday school. We allocated 2.6%, professional development 2.5%, and software is at 1%. Our goal for this current fiscal year is to get our spending to at least 90%. Everything that is put into our Title I budgets is 100% aligned to the school improvement plan. So everything that is put in there has to be based off of a goal that is in the school improvement plan. This next slide gives an overview of how the allocation process is done. Each school receives a per pupil allocation. It varies based on the percentages, the poverty percentages per school. So schools that have a higher poverty percentage receive a higher allocation. And so we use the October FTE count, the enrollment count, to determine how much each student will be allocated for our Title I schools. Again, everything that is in those budgets is aligned with their school improvement plan. And then I went in to provide an example of some of the ways that we are measuring if the things that are in the budget are being are being carried out in the schools. And an example was if schools decide to go to a professional development conference, or if they have someone come in, we have them do a professional development proposal. And in that proposal, we have to align it with the goals that are in their school improvement plans. We ask them to go ahead and identify the evidence of implementation, and then how are we going to measure the outcomes and provide a redelivery date for any information that is provided. And then down here, the last part of this slide, it just outlines some of the conferences that the schools have attended, where schools, more than 2 schools have attended. And these are conferences for various things. Some are based off climate and culture, instructional strategies, family engagement summit, where we had our family engagement staff go to get different strategies, professional learning communities. And then this slide, because we do spend most of our funds on salaries and benefits, I thought it was important to outline what types of salaries we are paying for with Title I funds. So currently in this school year, 54 academic coaches are in our school budgets, 4 RTI MTSS specialists, 25 family engagement staff, 13 paraprofessionals, and 30 teachers. So these vacancies that you see are recent vacancies. So any vacancies, to answer your question, any vacancies that were in the budget at the beginning of the year that did not get filled, when the schools have their mid-year review, to review where they are, the progress in their school improvement plans, they make decisions on, well, where are funds needed now. So we will move those vacancies and reallocate the funds to areas of need based on their plans. So, and in fact, actually, for family engagement, 1 vacancy was just filled. So there's also just 1 vacancy there. And then, for example, like the academic coach, she received a promotion to become an assistant principal. So that's a new vacancy. So we've given them an extension to the end of February to go ahead and advertise and fill those positions. And we will reallocate those to other areas based on the school's needs. And then our final slide here gives an overview of our team structure and compensatory programs. As stated earlier, we serve several different grants. We have 6 program specialists that work with 43 of our Title I schools. We have a 21st century coordinator, McKinney-Vento liaison and case manager and navigator, 2 data analysts, and 3 administrative secretaries. And then finally, we just outlined the different ways that we go into schools and support the schools. We provide talking points quarterly, where we go through the budgets with the principals. We go through where they are as far as their school improvement goals. I'm sorry, I'm trying to rush to get through, y'all.
We're going to go along as we need to hear it and we need to discuss.
Okay, good. All right, so we review all of these school improvement plans. We go through the budgets with the principals. And then the level of support that's provided is really differentiated based on the needs of the schools. Some schools, we have principals that have been doing Title I for years, so of course they don't need as much support, and our program specialists go into the schools and support as needed. We provide ongoing technical assistance with financial processes and review the entries in Munis. We work very closely with finance to make sure that the things that are put into Munis, align with what's in the budget, that everything's accurate, everything has been added that the state is going to require for a compliance piece. Work collaboratively with our academic coaches to collect those evidence of implementation of the things that are in the budget. And we also have started to participate in walkthroughs with the school leadership team, participate in the leadership team meetings, so we can use that information to inform and support the schools with what they should put into their Title I budgets. We also lead the professional qualifications and identifications for when those parents get those 10 days letters, those come through our department. We facilitate that. And lastly, but certainly not least, we work with our family engagement facilitators in all of the schools. We provide those monthly meet to learns where we provide them guidance and strategies where they can collaborate together and provide those supports to the schools and families and communities. So I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
I'm going to hit one out of the park real quick. Thank you so much I'll make comments. This is not directed toward you, nor your staff, nor on a negative view of individuals that work under the Title I budget. But it feeds into our need to continue to look at ROI on every single budget line item. And I know that you're already speaking to it and that the district is looking at it, because on page 30, you're telling me how we're going to spend and approve professional development. This is one of the areas that we as board members get asked probably the most questions about cutting funding, because it's bloated. I'm going to just, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm taking your numbers on page 31 as to how many positions are funded by Title I. My quick math was 126. I'm happy to see that we have rolled back the amount of professional development to 450 this year rather than the 732,000 last year. If I use just that 126 staff members for the $450,000 that's budgeted in FY26, that's almost $3,600 per staff member for professional development. That's great if we're actually getting a return on that $3,600. But it's a lot of money per person. If we would have spent the full $732,000 on 126 individuals last year, that's $5,800. I'm going to guess that's at least 10 to 15% of some of these individuals' salaries. That seems bloated to me, where if I even get professional development money from higher ed, I have to already have a disseminable product to ask for like $1,500, and I'm begging, borrowing, and pleading to get that, and that's not even promised year to year. So I would definitely like us, while we're working with A&M, while we're in a new mindset, this is just one area. So please, you came first, but I know every budget has this line item. We really need to, page 30 is that's a great page. That's a great page, because that means we're looking at what you need to do before you get given that money. And I hope then we're saying, you went, what are you doing different? And that report is there. That idea of justification, so that we just aren't having $450,000 in a budget, because we could pull some of that and go hunt for some more faculty, some more paraprofessionals if we could, rather than $3,600 for each one of those individuals to travel.
Yes, so professional development is certainly something that I'm looking at with general funds. A lot of our return on investment work has not cascaded down to compensatory ed yet, not in the way, not with the same level of fidelity that we're doing, but it's coming. And I think you can see evidence that they're already, even without it being applied, are beginning to work in that direction. Professional development, as it relates to that, what I will tell you is I am clear when people go to professional development, what they do when they come back, but it is very difficult to measure impact. They can come back and say, we went to the Ron Clark Academy, and when we come back, we're going to do these 3 things. But at the end of the day, I don't know if those 3 things means we have decreased discipline. I don't know if those 3 things equals better attendance. I just know that they say they're going to take these actions, and we check that, that you took the actions you said, but we don't know the impact of those actions on any metric right now. And that is going to require us to do a lot more return on investment. Like, that model's got to be very robust to be able to get to that level.
And again, I wanted to highlight it because I know this is across the district, and it's something that needs to be looked at, and I'm happy for page 31. I'm happy for the budget. For page 30, I'm happy for the budget being driven differently and pulled down a little bit. So I know it's being looked at. And it's transparent. We're talking about it here. We're being transparent as a board. The district is being transparent. The individuals that run these budgets are being transparent. So I'm glad that it is part of the process and that it's coming. And I know overnight you can't, your kids aren't reading well anymore, so you don't get any more professional development. I know that can't be how it is, but I'm glad that it is a part of the process that, again, like I said earlier, we want everything to change this year. It's not going to. It's going to take time, but we're moving in the right direction. I had Dr. Hoskins Brown, then Ms. Hall, then Mr. Moss, and then it sounds like everybody's going to talk real quick.
I just have a question. Thank you for your presentation and helping us see the lay of the work that the teams do. My question is about the delivery model of the services that compensatory programs provides. Is it still primarily a traditional human-to-human, person-to-person contact model of how we work with staff and with students? Are we using technology very much?
It is a so for our talking points, for example, we send out those invitations to principals, and they have that option. So some of them would prefer to do virtual, so some of them are virtual, some of them elect to do face-to-face. So we really work to meet the needs of that particular principal.
Thanks.
And also with any other areas, sometimes we may even go out and work with a secretary face-to-face because we just need to sit and touch the papers. And so it just depends on each school.
Thank you. So even with virtual, it's still one person in real time talking to, a parent or someone. And the reason I ask this is because the conversation that we're having about the cost, it seems like the delivery model in compensatory programs is still a very traditional human-to-human delivery model. Whereas on the academic side, like with our Ignite program, 15 minutes online, directed tutoring, really, really emphasizing how to use technology to get that delivery done. And you don't need a whole person all day. You get that person for 15 minutes for a child. So I think I'm not advocating for a change in the delivery model, but I'm just pointing out that humans to humans is more expensive than logging into a website, reading some passages, and improving your Lexile. And so I think that we can't compare them in terms of return on investment the same way, because the work that we're doing is different. And that's why I asked the question, how do you use return on investment when you're just moving dollars versus when you're working with people, packages that talk back, as we like to say, people who have free will? Because I think it can be done. I think it should be done. I just think we need to understand the nuances of when you're using strategies that are not built for humans and you're looking for changes in outcomes that are influenced by humans, and we need to give humans whatever the support they need to be able to meet the outcomes that we want to see with the ROI. Or change our metrics so that we understand they're influenced by a human who is waiting for an email to know whether a parent wants to be virtual, whether a parent wants to be in person, just those sorts of things. Because I do agree with Dr. Brinkman that efficiencies can be there, but I think we have to hear from our team what is the way that the delivery of compensatory programs needs to be in order to make sure that we make those moves with families. Because families aren't going to want to just be handled any kind of way. The same way the teacher said, hey, this software is not working. Some families may be like, look, that way doesn't work for me and my child. And as we get that information and we make our modifications with our team, using the team or technology, I think that's how we really get to return on investment.
Ms. Hall?
That's why I'm very interested in the whole Ignite program to see if, in fact, we've reached a very good partnership between a child having 15 minutes of that and then the rest of the day they're involved with human relationships and human interaction. Every piece of research I've looked at shows that one of the worst things about the pandemic is that it denied children the chance to have that person-to-person contact with their teacher. That all the wonderful technology we had, it was efficient, but it detracted from the relationships and from the growth of kids. But my main point, I wanted to talk about this professional development, because what I'm interested in seeing is higher quality instruction in our classrooms. So I want our teachers to have a deeper knowledge base than they have, and I want them to be more expert in their subject area and know how to relate what they know to teach, to how to teach the children what they know. So is that all under professional development? Because that's going to be very different for me. And when we start talking about cutting it to be more efficient, if that cuts that out, because to me, that's one of the main things. To me, how you achieve depends on the quality of your teacher. If you have an outstanding teacher, by golly, you're going to learn. And if your teacher isn't that smart and they're just 1 minute ahead of you as a student, then you're not going to get your bang for your buck. So where does professional development fit in terms of improving the quality of our teachers?
So I think an important thing for all of us to know here is that in this district, almost 100% of our Title I dollars flow down to the school. I don't get to decide what schools do with their Title I dollars. We don't get to tell them what to do. The school decides. So if the school decides going to the Ron Clark Academy is a good return on investment for them and improving the quality of education in their school, they get to do that. I don't get to decide that for them. And if another school decides, I want to use my dollars to go to the Innovation Conference in Los Angeles, they get to decide that. I do not get to decide that. So Title I dollars are very school-directed and decided, not district-decided. And so we have to build principal capacity to be able to make those discernments between what is actually going to get us a return on investment, I know we keep using that word, or that phrase, and what is actually needed in my building that will build teacher capacity.
Well, Dr. Watts, when Stacy gets that information back at the end of the year, that you're going to Ron Clark and you're going here and didn't improve achievement, then we get a chance to do something.
We're not currently monitoring that at the district level. That is probably more of a school's office. The principal supervisors are looking at that. And the way they have to capture that is in their evaluations of principals. You went to all this PD, but at the end of the day, your outcomes did not improve. And so that has to be captured in how our principals are monitored and evaluated. But as a district level, I get no decision making. And every school chooses to do what they want to do differently. So it would almost be impossible for us as a district to measure every single school's decision-making because every school is doing something different.
Well, colleagues, you understand the conundrum then, because our children who are least achieving are at these schools. So
Is this the custom?
we can
throughout
come up
different
with all
districts?
the stuff we want in the world, if in fact the children who need our help most have these straitjackets that we can't affect, then
So it's a balance, and I'll respond to Board Member Smith's question. In my previous district in Charlotte, we always had a Title I set aside at the district level that we could say every Title I school is going to do Ignite. There you go. Right? And that would be a decision made across the board for everyone in a district set aside. But in this district, we don't have a district set aside. All the money goes to the school.
So we need one.
We can.
I don't know why we don't have it. I just explained to somebody I don't know if that's a Georgia thing, but Title I is national, so.
To
In my
those-
previous district, we always had a
we
district
can
set
do
aside.
To those board members that have been here for a while?
We can do that. We can set aside funds for a particular reason. For example, Ignite, if it is in alignment with our district strategic plan. So we can set aside money out, set that aside first and then allocate the rest of the funds to the schools.
Mr. Moss, and then to Dr. Howard Hall. I got Ms. Grabowski.
I'm taking money from them.
Anybody in the audience?
I know. So
Since you
Check the parking lot.
I'll make this very brief because I think Ms. Hall just said exactly what I wanted to say, and that is, if our number one goal is literacy, and we have these 18 schools, and I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that most of these 18 schools are Title I schools. Can we not have a goal, use Title I funds to get these schools off that list? And if it's using, using Ignite or whatever we have, but again, we can talk about how unfair the promise thing, don't care. The most important thing is getting those 18 schools off the list. And if we can use Title I funds to help get those schools off that list, that's what we should do. So,
Can I add something?
yes.
In regards to, so if we did a district set aside for certain things, I just want you to keep in mind that that would reduce the allocation of the school's funds, which may impact some positions, and some schools are not funding some positions that they won't because they don't have enough money. So that's just another angle to look at it as well.
The bigger
Schools
picture.
would get less.
Yeah.
I'm going to Dr. Howard Hall, then Ms. Grabowski, then Reverend Smith, then back to Dr. Hoskins Brown.
Okay, I just like to also, I know you all understand that out there, we have to be careful that we don't supplant federal funds. So if Title I do decide to finance Ignite, have to make sure that the state is doing it, that locally that we're doing it also. Title I is you look at it as being the godmother of funding. We supplement. I say we because I still might make it like I'm still a Title I program manager. But what we do is supplement the fund. So with that being said, I had a question. We have 54 academic coaches, and all of those are Title I funded?
Yes, ma'am.
So how many state-funded academic coaches do we have as a district? Because that's a lot for Title I to fund. It's more academic coaches than there are teachers. There's 30 teachers. And also, are there 21 Title I schools? I don't know right offhand.
43.
How many?
43.
43.
It's the majority of the district it's but maybe 13 schools that are not designated.
I don't know where I get 21 from. Okay, so when I went to Delaware about 2 years ago, the entire district was a Title I district, and every classroom, K through 5th, had a full-time para. And that made a big difference. Every school did. And I know that if we have set-asides, that what we can't do at the school level, but that's also district level as well, because we do have a district staff. And not saying that we don't need the district staff, but we really need to look into exactly what's going on with the day-to-day operations. I did notice, as you said, they are now going into the schools. So were they not going into the schools?
No,
prior to that?
the core action walks is something that I was referring to, where instead of us going out instead of us going out individually, we are participating with the school leadership team to participate in those walkthroughs, and that helps us we can all be on the same page, hearing the same information and hearing the same needs. So we are participating with those walkthroughs.
Those coaches are school-level coaches. They're not district-deployed coaches.
I know, but
Right.
I had to ask because that we don't want to supplement the funding by providing all these school-level coaches, and then the districts aren't, the district's
Right,
not paying for.
but I will
for
tell you,
coaches.
our principals have asked repeatedly for us to provide them coaches, and we've seen data from the state that suggests having a literacy coach is getting a high return on investment. We currently, every school doesn't have it because they don't have the additional funds. So it is something that we're looking at. The only way I will go with that plan and that investment is if we have a consistent model so that we don't have an academic coach that's doing one thing over here and something else over here and something else over here, because then there's no way for me, again, to measure the impact because everybody's doing something different. So our schools office Dr. Barnes is looking at how we can bring consistency across coaching models, how we support those individuals, and we're also looking to the state to guide us. But every principal in this district has asked repeatedly, why can't the district provide us a coach? So that may be something that you all see. And then Title I could supplement that. So if I'm providing a coach, then Title I could come in and provide an additional coach.
Right. Right.
I think it's me. So just quickly, I had a question about how those school improvement plans are evaluated, because to me, that's the really important part, but it sounds like that is coming from,
That's happening.
I mean, it's,
And Dr. Barnes can talk to that.
Good morning. So, very great conversation. One of the things that our principal supervisors do with our principals is they create a school improvement plan, and then they break that school improvement plan down into 45-day plans. And so there are 4 45-day plans that take place over the year. Part of that plan is to allocate funding for specific strategies, initiatives to improve teacher performance competencies that will hopefully translate into student outcomes. As we speak right now, our principal supervisors are having one-on-one meetings today with principals to reevaluate those 45-day plans and their budgets to make sure that money is being allocated towards end-of-year high outcome strategies for student outcomes. So this is how we're taking the Title I funds and any other funding sources to make sure that it is actually aligned to a school improvement objective of the actual school improvement plan. As a response to the academic coaches, about a year ago, we were thinking about a budget ask of academic coaches. At that time, we did an in-house study to determine what was the effectiveness of the academic coaches throughout the district. What we learned was that there was a limitation in that study that we could not answer, which was what was the standardized way in which we develop academic coaches and a coaching model for teachers across schools. And what we have erected this year is a more streamlined, formalized process so that we can determine that what is the impact that academic coaches are having in terms of teacher development, and which will result into student outcomes. And so as we continue to monitor that data, it could potentially turn into that this is a good investment of funds that we may need to look at how do we support schools at a higher level across all schools that at least have a baseline allocation of academic coaches, and then we can use the actual Title I funds to differentiate, augment, and go above and beyond of what the district is currently providing. So case in point, if we have a non-Title I school that as a district, we provided that school 1 academic coach or 2, we know that our Title I schools and some that have greater needs, then they can actually use their funds to provide a 3rd one or a 4th one or something else that is needed for that school.
thank you. And then just very quickly, I think that there is a perception that Title I is related to the academic performance rather than the poverty level of the students who attend. So I think that is something that we need to, as we're looking at our marketing, because we have some, schools that are Title I that are challenging, but we also have some schools that are excelling that are also Title I, as you mentioned a minute ago. So I think that's something for us as board members to recognize and try and educate our community that just because it's a Title I school does not mean it's a failing school.
No.
So I just want to make that point as well. Thank you.
Reverend Smith?
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you to the Title I Department. I want to be clear, I am not on board with stripping schools from their funding, but I would like to make sure that safeguards are put in place that schools are equipped, empowered, and exposed to ways to make their schools better, because I don't believe it's a one-size-fits-all. So I do want to be clear in that on my side. But the other question I wanted, or statement I wanted to make, was relating to the McKinney-Vento. I see that we have 3 positions outlined here. That's the only staffing that we have for that.
Yes.
Okay. Roughly, how many students do we have that have been identified as homeless? That McKinney-Vento is the department that services homeless children throughout our district, correct?
Yes. I just asked for that. Our last number was about 1,080.
Okay.
That's what we ended up with last year, and we're in the process, we're still early in the year now.
Gotcha. So we have 1,080 students identified, and we have 3 employees that service them?
We have 3 employees with the title McKinney-Vento. We have social workers, we have counselors, we have family engagement coordinators. All of those individuals would be supporting a student that may not have stable housing. Those are just 3 with that specific title, likely to be paid out of title of that funding for that. But it's a team of people that's working to support.
They work very closely with the school social workers and counselors. They lead the effort.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha. Do we feel like that they're equipped enough, that we have enough staffing to support those students?
As of right now, I think that we are making it work. I would actually check with our liaison, Ms. Hill, to give you a better answer. But I will say that one time it was just her. So we've gained 2 positions, I think, in the last 5 years. I've been here 5 years. So we have gotten where she's gotten additional support. So.
And I think it's important here to note that while enrollment is declining, people say, well, your enrollment is declining, so you need less money. But I don't think what people sometimes calculate is the kids that are often left in our district are the ones who have the more acute needs.
Right.
So while you see a declining enrollment, the ones left are the ones that need the most service. And so we don't necessarily experience a decline in enrollment because we're working so much with kids who have so many needs. And so that number of homeless students that we have, I would probably say is our documented, but we don't know that a student is homeless unless they tell us that they're homeless. And so I would probably say the number is much higher than that.
Agreed.
And we are working to service those kids. So yes, you have a declining enrollment, but again, the students left behind are the ones that often have the most need.
And I will add that when I was looking, she gave me a list of over the years, and that is the highest as of yet. So while the enrollment may be going down, that particular number is going up.
Based on the, page 28, I think it is, how much is being allocated towards that? Do we have a number?
Well, that's a
of any
set
sort?
aside, so they get a different allocation outside of this, just for McKinney-Vento, and that budget was about $67,000. No, those positions we paid with a district set aside for consolidation. So all of these grants, all the people on that last page are paid in a consolidation for all of our positions. So they are paid out of that. Well, a percentage, 75% is paid out of that, and then they paid 25% out of their grants.
Can communities and organizations put into that pot to support the services of those homeless children?
I think they would have other ways, like they could support through our foundation,
Okay.
but it wouldn't go into this pot.
Into the grants funding, so it could be a different source that we could pull from, but not this particular grant, because it's federally funded.
And understand that when we talk about millage rate, that is the community's investment. That is a way that the community is saying, we are investing in high needs, kids that have challenges. So that's the whole conversation when we talk about, are we reducing the millage rate? When we reduce it, that is in essence taking away dollars from some kids that really need the money.
Thank you. Dr. Hoskins Brown?
Dr. Howard Hall addressed all my concerns. She made my comments, so thank you.
Good job, Dr. Howard Hall. Do I have any more comments? Going once, twice? Thank you all for attending the longest committee meeting of the Savannah-Chatham County Public School Systems. But as Dr. Watts said, we need to talk. Everything that was presented today needs to be presented, and the conversations that we're having help us generate our future planning. So thank you to all the staff that poured into this, the staff that were here today. Our next meeting is March 11th here, 8:30 before the March board meeting. Maybe we'll start at 8:15 and have a light breakfast. Thank you very much and have a great day.